A number of issues that President Cyril Ramaphosa talked about in light of the 30 years of freedom. He spoke to the celebration, the significance of Freedom Day. My colleague Ziyanda Ngobo talking about just how 30 years ago and a little bit more that a black person would not be able to stand in the grounds of the union buildings. What are some of the key highlights that you would have picked up from the president's speech?
Good afternoon, Hugo. Good afternoon to the viewers as well. Thanks for having me. You'll have to forgive me for the poor signal, and you'll also hear in the background that there's some kind of a noise because of the very same occasion where you caught me. But to come to your question, I think the president painted a picture which is correct in terms of the achievements that we have made as a country, the strides, and also singing the praises in terms of painting the picture of how we lived before the attainment of democracy in terms of the ensuring the rights that were non-existent, and also how people suffer in terms of them being disenfranchised. But all I can say too is that what we heard is what we've been hearing during the times of Mbeki, and also during the times of Zuma. He also touched on the issue of employment and claiming that there's been the doubling of numbers, but you and I will be aware that one of the critical issues, the thorny issues in South Africa currently, is unemployment at a basic level, so which has manifested itself in a number of ways. We see protests day in and day out. So one would say, while the book is written and it's known to everyone, we must also be able to hear a speech that is going to give an essence of what made people to sacrifice and also be prepared to go to jail in order for them to have this particular democracy. I do not think the president was fair enough and honest in terms of painting a picture as it is in South Africa currently.
But when we look at social issues, let's focus a little bit on equality and human rights. Paint a picture for us of what life would have been like prior to 1994, particularly for those that were born after 1994 and cannot relate, or this conversation may not resonate with all of them.
Well, for a person who always hear that there was a time before 1994, it's a question of the young people being told that they were not allowed, their elders of forebears were not allowed to travel in the cities freely. But talk about those cities nowadays, they've just deteriorated and degenerated into some kind of ghettos. And there is nothing to show for that. But even those young people who were born after 1994, who just listen to the stories, they would have expected to see a better life where there is equality in terms of education and also the distribution of wealth, which is the critical part. There are quite a number of things that make the government, in terms of the department and so forth. You and I know that it's a cry for everyone. No one is happy to say it, but in paper, well, South Africa has got the most shining constitution and the rights enshrined for everyone who live in South Africa. But at a social level, it's poverty on the side of the Africans who were suffering even prior to the attainment of democracy.
Kuthula, just one final thing. I'd like to juxtapose South Africa to other democracies across the continent that have been independent for 30 years or more, and take a look at what is that period before a country, well, from the time that a country gains independence to a time where it's able to walk on its own 2 feet, if you will, for want of a better description. Because for many countries, they seem to go through this period where stuff is working prior to independence, they become independent, and then it all goes downhill before it starts to rise. Is South Africa amongst the other countries, or is it an outlier in any way?
South Africa is not. We hear people saying we are going to Zimbabwe. We are speaking about our neighbor here, and there was over the fact that the countries, most of whom in Africa came of the 19th downward spiral. Well, South Africa is different in a sense because there's been emergence of dictatorships, like in many African countries. But there's something common, is that Africans are suffering. Africa, with the institutions and infrastructure that was built during the white-only government in migrate, that on its own tells a story that South Africa is regarded as the land of milk and honey by Africans. It tells a story that in the minds and hearts of many Africans who did not realize the actual democracy at the social level, they still look at us as a country with opportunities, which unfortunately become a bone of contention among South Africans themselves that spills itself to the political debates at large.